Several days ago, 2 police officers were killed in what is being described as an execution-style killing, where a young black man, who is the prime suspect, walked up to the patrol car and shot both police officers dead. Now, maybe a day or so after that, another police officer was killed by a transient man in Florida. Recently, these 3 police killings altogether have raised a great deal of hysteria from police forces all across the country. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, I don't particularly have any sympathy for the police officers that have died, considering the amount of people that they have recently killed in their brutal attacks. I find it very interesting that the killing of these 2 police officers are being considered having been done in execution style. Someone just walked up and shot them. Does execution style count when police officers gun down someone without question? When they gun down an unarmed person? When they choke someone to death on the street while they're being restrained? Does that count as an execution style? Like, what do you call that? Because so far they don't really count it as much of anything. But I would say that's probably far more execution style and the killing of those 2 police officers, because this is, of course, 2 police officers, state employees, particularly the coercive arm of the bourgeois state, repressing people and killing them. In a move that's probably pretty predictable, Pat Lynch, the head of the largest police officers union in New York, blamed Mayor Bill DeBlasio for the recent killings, that somehow he had blood on his hands. And also, he blamed the people who have been protesting against police brutality as well.
There's blood on many hands tonight. Those that incited violence on the street under the guise of protest, that tried to tear down what New York City police officers did every day. We tried to warn, it must not go on, it cannot be tolerated. That blood on the hands starts on the steps of City Hall in the office of the mayor. Starting today, we started the mourning for our brother police officers.
We can very much look forward to these killings being used to justify a further fascist state crackdown upon the population. This has already begun, where police organizations across the country are now blaming protesters, people who've been opposed to the police just killing them with a free hand, of being responsible for these police killings. It's as though the police can't imagine any reason why people would be opposed to them. Particularly the New York police, who just can't seem to think of any reason why people don't like them. Strange. But I find something very interesting with their comments. It seems as though the entire peaceful protest against police killings can be delegitimized with the one-time killings of these 2 police officers, as if these 2 extreme rare events justifies squashing the entire rightful peaceful protest about civilians being killed by police. If that can be done, then how does the 1,000 people killed by police officers this year not delegitimize the entire system? Or what about it? There's scores and scores of people killed by police officers all the time, yet their deaths in no way challenge the legitimacy of the policing system, or even the entire system in general. It seems tremendously hypocritical to me. Now, something I want to add, without seeming too cold-hearted. This really seems to me a case of the chickens coming home to roost. Now, there are questions as to whether the person who killed the 2 police officers in New York was mentally ill or not, and there's a bit of a case that can be made in that regard. However, isn't this something they've kind of got coming? Police have had a free hand at killing the population, particularly the African-American population, with no consequences. Like I said previously, over 1,000 people have died this year from all various races, not just African-Americans. And yet nothing happens to these police officers. And we see now the rising controversy of what happened over in Ferguson, where other prosecutors are now saying that testimony was false and that they can prove as such. But at what point? I take the example of Christopher Dorner, a man who saw tremendous amounts of racism inside his own police department. And then when he spoke up and said something about it, they told him to shut up. When he went to the proper authorities and reported this happening, they forced him to quit his job. So what does this tell us? That if someone, even in their own department, one of their own, says this is wrong and goes through all the lawful channels to try to stop it, to do something about it, report it to their superiors, use the completely lawful, legitimate process to report these things that theoretically would stop them, but then it never does. What does that tell you? Well, what's the next logical step after having saying that the lawful, legitimate process, the lawful, legitimate, non-violent process doesn't work? What would logic tell you after that? I'll leave you that to decide for yourself. And finally, I think it's important to remind us of one particular quote, one that's often attributed to Stalin, which he never actually said. And that is, the death of one is a tragedy. The death of 1,000 is merely a statistic. And I think that describes the police reaction to these killings exactly. The 1,000 they killed this year is nothing more than a statistic, something written down in their logbooks. But these 2 police officers having died, that's a massive tragedy with tremendous amounts of outrage, right?